All right, so if you got any questions about the work you're supposed to do over the break, you can just send me a message on Twitter, and then I'll just address what you need. 2 people in here. I don't know why I couldn't get the original one to work, but oh well. So anything from enlightened absolutism, and if you got a chance to start on French Revolution, we can cover that today too. So we'll go till 9:40, or if you don't need it after a certain amount of time, that's fine too. If you don't know what the tag is, it's MRNORTON34. All right, one person, you just hanging out to see what everybody asks, or I don't know what's going on. 3 people. Still don't have a question yet. Apparently somebody put no, I'm at work. I'm not sure who that is, though. Exciting review here with no questions. All right, first one. I got to pull up the learning targets from French Revolution Lesson 2. Pulling it up now. All 6 of them? You need all 6 or just certain parts? Well, let's just go through them then. Explain what the Estates General was. So the Estates General is basically like a representative body of the French government, but it's pretty much obsolete because you have to remember that with a monarchy you don't have any sort of representative body. But what ended up happening is the French crown had basically spent all the money that they could and no one would lend them any more money. So they needed to make some changes, and the specific types of changes that Louis XVI wanted to make, he needed help from the Estates General, which hadn't been called in hundreds of years. So I had the wrong one. Okay. Wait, what? Well, I'll go through them anyways. So the Estates General, let me get my personal notes up here so I don't tell you anything wrong. Well, you got to keep in mind that we have 3 estates we've already talked about before. So each of the 3 estates are going to make up the Estates General. So we've got the first estate, which is about 130,000 people, and that's all the clergy. That shouldn't be anything new. The other thing you need to keep in mind is the church owns about 10% of the land in France. And then you had rich clergy and poor clergy too. That's just something to make sure that you know, is that just because you were in the clergy didn't mean you were rich. You had the second estate, which is the nobility, which is about 350,000 people, and they own about 25 to 30% of the land. And they're also divided amongst wealth, because as we talked about in previous classes as well, that just because you were a noble doesn't mean you had money. So you had rich nobles and you had poor nobles too. You had 2 types of nobles. You had the nobility of the sword, which we've talked about before back with the Fronde. Nobility of the sword with the old, kind of think of it as old money, the people who've always come from money, the people who've always been part of the nobility. And then we have the nobles, the nobles of the robe, which those are the ones who gained their titles to nobility because of how they practiced being public servants for the king. So that's kind of the new money type of people. And then you have the third estate, which is the common society, and they own about 35 to 40% of the land. Let me get to here. Trying to get to where. Okay. So the makeup of the Estates General, each estate is represented. What's going to end up coming down to a weird thing is that you have people vote by order, or by like there's 2 ways that they could have done it. They could have had the third estate vote, and then have everybody who represented the third estate count as 1 vote per person, or you could have each estate, so the first, second, and third would vote, and they would only get 1 vote. So if you allow them to vote by head, then the third estate would just run wild and be able to put anything they want in, and the king doesn't really want that either. So they end up going by voting by order, which obviously gives the other 2 estates an advantage, because they can always gang up and outnumber the third estate. So basically what ends up happening is the third estate gets really frustrated, and they leave the meeting and go to a tennis court, and basically members of the first and second estate will go too. And then we have the tennis court oath, which basically says they're going to go ahead and work towards a new constitution. Let me see some of the other learning targets for that one. Let me see. Well, I already covered the first 3, basically. Covered the 4th. The fall of the Bastille. Okay, so the fall of the Bastille, that's a military prison. There's not really many people in it, but it was something that was symbolizing the the French crown. So when you end up defeating them, that kind of shows them, the common people, that you can actually go ahead and take on members of the monarchy and the king and his army and win. When you read through some of your primary sources, you'll see that to the fault of their own, the people who were guarding the Bastille could have turned and fired cannons on the people, the mob that was coming to them, and easily defeated them, but they chose not to. And that ended up being the cause of their death, because I believe the people who went in there ended up executing everyone. Because it's a military prison, it also gives you access to weapons that you wouldn't normally have had as well. Determine the cause and effect of the Great Fear. So the Great Fear is basically this whole idea that King Louis XVI is trying to bring in foreign governments to try and overthrow the the protesters, you can call them protesters, but basically the rebel, the people that are basically stirring up the French Revolution, and that basically turns into a bunch of chaos. And basically, that's one of the things that leads into oh goodness gracious, what is it called? I cannot remember off the top of my head. Hold on. Reign of Terror. That's what it is. Okay. So those are those kind of like a little summary. Are there some more details you should know? Yeah, probably. If there was a specific question that you wanted to have answered from the learning targets because of the activities associated with it, it'd be easier to get into what exactly it is you're confused on. But other than that, that's about the 6 of them. Lesson 3, learning targets 1 and 3. Okay. Let's see. I gotta pull those up. Three. Okay. The third one, Terry, is pretty easy. On lesson 3, 1, Declaration of Rights in Man. So basically, from what I got out of it for the first one, you're not going to know what I'm talking about because you didn't read Terry's message, but first learning target for lesson 3 of the French Revolution is determine how the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen impacted the French Revolution. So basically what you have is, these are the ideas of the Enlightenment showing up. As we talked about in enlightened absolutism and the Enlightenment, that things would start showing, ideas from that time period would start showing up in the French Revolution. So here's where you start to see those things start to come aboard. So if you can look at when you look and read the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen, because that is one of the things you'll have to do from your assignment activities, is you should be able to pick out the things that were discussed about the Enlightenment inside of that and see how it actually applies to what they're thinking and trying to achieve. The third one, where it says compare and contrast the status and attitudes of women from the Renaissance to the French Revolution, this is where we actually start to see some equality for women. It won't be for very long because Napoleon comes in and takes them away. They started to have the ability to testify in court, but their, if I recall, their testimony wasn't weighted or taken as heavily into account as a man's would. A woman could divorce. I believe a woman could own property. So there are some positive changes for women. So this is where we start seeing breaking away from women aren't able to do anything. So if we were going to do a continuity and change over time, this would be where we're actually discussing that changes are occurring. But then, as I said, those things do change after a few years when Napoleon comes in, because he undoes most of the things that women were able to gain advantages in under the French Revolution. So that takes care of those two. So we got anything else? Oh, Shannon says, can you do the learning targets for lesson 2? Oh, I did those already. Let's see. I'll go back to it though. Let me look. That's lesson 1. Yeah, Shaylin, I'm assuming that's you. Let me see. No, that's not really your. Okay. So Shaylin, if you just go back earlier, I pretty much went through the 6, the Estates General, how it functioned, what caused the Estates General to transition to a National Assembly. That's because the king had basically locked them out, and that's how it turns into the tennis court oath. Lending targets 1 through 4 pretty much just build off of each other. It's what we refer to as scaffolding. I'm asking you to figure out what the Estates General was. The next one, how does it actually function? So with 3, what causes the transition to a National Assembly? So it's basically, I'm asking you, what is it for the purpose? How did it work for the second one? And then why did it stop? Like, what were the problems with the Estates General? Why did they have to move into this new thing called a National Assembly? And then the tennis court oath has to do with the National Assembly. So that's how they all stack off of each other. That's what the goal of that lesson was, just basically show you what exactly is going on during this time, to get you to understand why later events unfold, like the Bastille and the Great Fear. So if we got anything else? Curious who the 3 viewers are. I'm pretty sure who 2 of them are. Family marriage question number 3. Okay, let's see. Family marriage. I gotta pull it up. Let me find it. Lesson 3. Hold on. I'll just go over the topics you just mentioned. Family marriage question 3. Let me pull it up here. Why am I not finding it? Look at the role of women. Let me see here. I know I should have it in here somewhere. I don't have, the problem is that when I create my lesson plans, I don't number the activities. I only number them when I have yours, so I don't know what the issue is. Hold on. Probably goes back to, sorry, it's taking a second. All right, well, I'll give you some other things too. This is more towards when Napoleon took over. So some of the things that he does is, it was a little bit easier to get a divorce, specifically under the French terms the French Revolution had, but Napoleon comes in and makes it more difficult. He basically turns control over the household back to the father. So that was something that had happened for women, is that they were more in control of themselves. Now the father gets put back as the head of household, and basically you have to do anything the father says. The other thing too, a woman who committed adultery could be put in prison. So this is another thing for inequality, where the husband can only be accused if he moved his mistress into the household. So you could only try and put a guy in prison for committing adultery if he actually brought his mistress in. So that is something that, not really much in terms of equality. This gets back to in lawsuits, women are treated as minors and their testimony is regarded as less reliable than that of men. So that's another way that shows that under Napoleon that women start going backward from the brief gains that they had. That's pretty much all I have for that. I'm not sure. Let me pull up my lesson plans for that one. Lesson 3. That's not it. And I don't really have anything. Let me see here. Learning target 3, lesson 3. Compare and contrast the edit. Okay, yeah, I've already done that. So compare and contrast the status of attitudes towards women from the Renaissance to the French Revolution. So I've got that one. If you got to go back and look at it, this is just basically, I had pointed out, we talked pretty much from the beginning of class that women are treated as second-class citizens. Then we end up having the French Revolution, and they end up getting rights that they didn't have before. And then under Napoleon, we end up going backwards, where some of the things that they had gained under the French Revolution were taken away from them by Napoleon. So, let me see here. Kind of sticking with lesson 3, though, the one thing that you might want to notice is that with force is determined the impact that women had in the early phases of the French Revolution. Would be important to notice that the King of France, King Louis XVI, was captured because of women. Basically, they didn't have any bread, and they somehow formed this rally and basically stormed the Bastille, stormed the King's Palace with some help of some of, I can't remember who it was, but basically some members of some armed resistance, and basically kidnapped the king. And that's pretty much how he ends up falling apart after that point. So if it wasn't for women, Louis XVI would have never been captured. We also have where women become involved in political clubs too. You might want to take a look at that as well. I know there was at least one multiple choice question on one of our practice tests last year for it, which was a little bit confusing with the way the cartoon was drawn. So, but it's fine. Yeah, if you have a question about a specific primary source that I had you read, that's going to be something that I really can't do in this, because I'd have to sit down and reread the section to probably look up specific evidence. So it's probably something we'd have to address in class on Monday, which is only a week from today, unfortunately, right? Let me see if I can go through any more of these. Go back to learning targets instead. Let's see. Just in case nobody said anything about one. Analyze the role of the United States magazines and newspapers in the French Revolution and determine the immediate and underlying causes of the French Revolution. The first one with the role of the United States is you just had the American Revolution, and the United States is actually the first government that starts putting ideas from the Enlightenment into practice. So the United States is basically showing that it can actually be done. And then I get to mention determine the cause of change. Oh, okay. No, that's question 3. question 3. I don't have questions. I'm not following when you put that's question 3. Activity 3 and activity. I don't like. I've got 15 questions per. I don't. Hold on. This is my notes back. That's not it. Hold on. Let me say this is the chapter I have to talk about birth control. You want to give me... This was just somehow I didn't put it in my notes. Hold on, I'll be right back. We'll just look in the textbook and see if I can find what you're discussing. All right. Oh my God, lesson 3 winter break assignment. There, you can. All right. You must be talking about activity 3 because there are no question 3. But I'll look at it again. Okay, I've already gone through the learning targets for lesson 3. So maybe you just missed it. So it's kind of where I'm getting confused at is because you keep asking me about something that I've already covered. But I'll look it up again. Okay, so I've covered 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have anything in my, let me see, challenges, cause and effect. No. I don't have anything regarding family in the learning targets for lesson 3. Whatever. I'll just go through all of them anyways. Here, so the first one, Declaration of, I already did that one, I'm not doing it again. Compare and contrast Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen with the Declaration of Rights of Woman and a Citizen. Basically, all you're doing in the second part of the second learning target for lesson 3 is you have this idea of saying this is how women should be treated. Remember, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen is all about here's everything that men should have, so it's their argument of saying here's the things that women should have. So what specifically are they arguing on each side? Determine the impact that women had in the early phase of the French Revolution. Just did that in the last 5 minutes. Compare and contrast the Constitution of 1791 with the model of government that had existed prior. I mean, that's just a compare and contrast. Let me see. Determine the cause and effect of secularizing the French Catholic Church. Let me get to those then. Describe the early challenges the new French government faced. I need to close out the notes here. I don't need 18 up anymore. Oh my gosh. All right, so let me get to the 1791. Okay. All right, so you have a new constitution in 1791. It creates a limited constitutional monarchy, so that should be a key difference right there is prior to the Constitution of 1791, it was an absolute monarchy. And the constitutional monarchy is where basically, I mean, it's self-explaining. You have a constitution. So now you're putting actual limits on what the king can and can't do. So that would be a major difference right there. So some other things too is that you have 745 members that are elected to this this new assembly, and they're elected indirectly. And the body that is elected is supposed to sit for 2 years. You end up still having the rich being the ones who control basically everything, because there's tax paying requirements. So if you didn't pay a certain amount of taxes, then you couldn't run. So if you weren't wealthy, you're just kind of out of luck. So you have this government where the rich are still basically running everything in favor of themselves, because when people run government, they're not going to do anything that is going to damage their power and reputation. They do start to restructure France. They abolish the old system of provincial divisions and create a system of 83 departments. So there's France is not split into provinces anymore. Basically, it's 83 departments. And the departments are basically divided into districts and then into communes, and all are supervised by elected councils who oversee basically everything. So those are new as well. So that's, I mean, the big thing to basically come away with in that particular learning target is that we have a constitutional monarchy from 1791 on until Napoleon, because he becomes emperor and he's not going to have anyone get in his way. So that's the main thing. Constitutional monarchy from 1791 on, and then before that we had absolute monarchy. So as far as the other learning target, let's see. Determine the cause and effect of secularizing the French church. Let me see here. Basically what ends up happening is, no, hold on. You're under assignment 1. Scroll down. Then I have no idea why you keep telling me lesson 3. You're under assignment 1. Get down, cat. Let's see. Why don't you just type the actual question you want? Because this has just turned into a game of hide and seek. And if I can't figure it out, then just save it and we'll just look at that first on Monday. Okay, lesson 3, winter break, is it? No. Oh, hold on. Oh, never mind. You know what? I finally found it. Okay, determine the cause for change in regards to family, marriage, and birth rate. So it's not French Revolution. I got it. Now I know why there's some confusion. So just a moment. This is my fault. It's the first. There we go. Let me get to it. That's the one we have to talk about. All right, so here we go. Let me make sure I read the question again. Causes for change in regards to family, marriage, and birth rate. Okay. All right. So, most newlywed couples wanted to establish their own households. You have men that are men and women are waiting till later in life to become married in order to save up the necessary finances to do so. So we have men, basically, they're waiting till they're about 27 or 28 to get married, and women are waiting till about 25 to 27. The increase in birth rate is not as high as it could be. Part of that is because waiting longer to get married means that women aren't having children as early as they could and for longer periods of time. Large numbers of unmarried women in their childbearing years did exist throughout Europe. Let's see. All right. So here's the other things to kind of keep in mind too. Birth control techniques are becoming popular, which reduces the amount of children that families have, and the method that they basically use is withdrawal. I'm not going to go into that. You can ask Mr. Zemansky what that is, because I'm not touching that with for anything. So the other thing too, with the role of children, they end up helping with the house's finances. So in urban areas, you have children that basically help their parents' business. So they're still part of that too, where the children are basically, they're not like what you would experience today, where you get to go to school. Basically, the children that you did have would go ahead and as they get older and capable, they would help around the house in order to try and improve the finances of the household. So kids would get jobs earlier. If your family owned a business, you would do that. Moving to the rural areas, you have where children are basically out working on the farm alongside their mother or father. So they also participated as much as they could in the cottage industry. So hopefully you know what that is. Some of the roles of married women, if you were out on the farm, you raised vegetables, you tended livestock, so that's the animals. You'd sell any eggs, vegetables, and milk that you could get from the livestock that you did have. Role of women married to propertyless agricultural workers. So if you're married to somebody who doesn't own any property, but they are working out in the fields farming, you basically are going to be doing that too. And then if you're rolled to an artisan in the city, so it's like a craft maker. So like if you're a shoemaker or a clock maker or you make clothes or anything, you're helping out with that too. If you're a wife of an unskilled worker, chances are you're probably going to be working as an unskilled laborer too. So you'd be basically a laundress. So you go out and clean laundry, and then you would peddle food as much as you could too. So that's basically how the role for women changed. As far as, let me see if I can get to it. Let me get back to it. Hold on. Some other things that you want to take note of too when you start talking about the differences between the classes is that you have the country home. For the wealthy, you have this idea of having privacy that the wealthy could have. Obviously, these aren't things that can be applied to the lower classes. You had the grand tour, which is basically when children would become about your age, they would basically go off and their family would give them plenty of money to go and tour various countries around Europe. That's why it's referred to as the grand tour. It was supposed to be some sort of an educational tool. You were supposed to be sent with a tutor as well, but we know that basically all that happened was drinking and partying for the most part. Let me see here. Anything else? The other thing that you should probably pay attention to as well, as far as changes with children being raised, at least in the wealthier homes, kids are basically starting to have a way of life where they're basically children how you know them today. They're given toys. They're not seen as much as like with the lower classes I mentioned earlier, where they're supposed to contribute to the financial situation of the family. They're basically, this is where the way that children are kind of treated now, that's where that starts to come about, is through those changes during that time. So I hope that covers that question. Let me look at it a little bit longer. Family, marriage, and birth rate. No, I covered their changes to family. I covered marriage, and I covered birth rate. So there's that. If there's not anything else, I mean, I finally got around to answering Terry's question. Not sure why I couldn't figure out what you were saying. Probably my fault. Oh well. Maybe because I thought it was so easy that I didn't pick up on that. But oh well. Well, the other thing you want to make sure that you pick up on too, as far as inhabitants of the inner cities, this is kind of the preview of what's going to come when we start talking about the Industrial Revolution, is the cities become basically this nasty, filthy area that, especially the inner city portion. So the way that the cities are designed, it's kind of like a series of circular zones. The very middle downtown portion, the center of the city, is where all of your industrialization is going to happen. That's also where your poor people live. And it's just absolutely filthy. And a lot of the things that occur for problems are inadequate drinking water, so it's dirty drinking water, so that's going to cause a lot of diseases. You have inadequate ways of removing waste from the city, so that again brings upon diseases. And and then as you start going further out, the further basically away you live from the city, the wealthier you were. So just keep that in mind too. Well, there'll end up being changes regarding that, but that's a couple chapters away. So, but yeah, when we get to the Industrial Revolution, which should be shortly after we come back, after we finish breaking down chapters 18 and 19 in class, we'll be ready to go ahead and knock out the Industrial Revolution. And it's really, really sad to read some of the living conditions that those people lived in. Small, cramped rooms, 10 people sleeping in one room. It's pretty dreadful. Let me see here. Oh, Terry must be done then. So, give you a couple more minutes if you got another question. I'll take it and try and roll from there. If not, let's just shut it down because I think we're just about talked out here. Hopefully your break is going well. I've basically been spending mine putting together Legos, so that's always fun. All right, well, I will see you a week from today. Till next time.